Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, there's a whole situation picking up where last week's episode left off with the whole Nick and Nancy situation. I was like, okay, so there's a reveal at the end about, the cell phone. So, the number she's trying to contact, the last person that was in contact with Tiffany ends up being Nick, but I was like, she's not going to find that phone until later on. It's like, no, literally at the beginning of this next episode, she finds the phone and everything. So that's an interesting conversation because it's something I'd also had pieced together because I was an idiot, because I was like, right, the thing he had pulled out was in Nancy's mom's car, which that's an element to this whole situation that still was never solved about, like, well, never mind, because I'm about to say, never mind, we found the connection later on, I'm about to say. But it's like, how does she get it to Nancy's mom's car is what I'm wondering about. Well, because we end up finding out from, this whole situation, which I like to kind of breeze past it. It's like, I know about your file because I looked into my dad's files. It's kind of like, that was quickly left because I thought that'd be a bigger thing of like, whoa, I thought you were going to wait for me to tell you, but I guess with just so much stuff happening all at once, it's just gone boom, 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 boom. I guess Nick kind of just let that go just because it's like, yeah, I got a couple secrets of my own, so it's just like, whatever the case may be, but it was interesting finding out this connection of like, what's the connection between, Nick, Tiffany, and Nancy's mom? Well, it turns out Nancy's mom was Nick's social worker after he was convicted. Well, during, while Nancy's dad, Carson was helping be his, lawyer during the case, but even afterwards, she would come and visit him after he was, sentenced, so now it turns into this whole thing of, because Nancy's in a complicated situation of like, well, do I believe Nick? Like, obviously he's lied to me. He's kept so much, his past. Like, obviously I said it was okay, but I need to know now, like, where this all stands, especially because Karen brings her the proposition of like, well, the fact of the matter is things aren't going to look good for you. You're going to have a felony on your record because, breaking and entering, because obviously it makes you look even more guilty, especially because McGinnis seems like he's got it out for Nancy, which once again, I feel like that's not 100% the case. I feel like there's definitely something more to it, but we'll see. Regardless of all of that, there is a whole situation of, you help us build a case against Nick. At the very least, it can pull some of the suspicion away from you, and it'll all kind of be good. And now she kind of puts, Nancy in that position of, okay, so what are you going to do? And now Nancy has to decide. And everyone else is being like, yo, you should totally turn Nick in because, hey, Ace kind of points it out of like, he murdered someone, didn't he? That must be because of McGinnis. It has to be, because it's like, how do you just jump to that? Because it's like, why did he? I was like, did he steal something? Did it? Ace was the one that went to like, specifically, isn't he said he was the one that specifically said manslaughter? It's like Nancy didn't jump on that, but it's like, how did you go to that? How do you make that assumption immediately? So it's like McGinnis had to have gone through Nick's records and then kind of, that's why Ace knows what he knows, but we'll see in that regard. But everyone else is like, turn on Nick, but obviously Nancy's conflicted because she cares about Nick, and for her, she's all about the truth. And the fact of the matter is, yes, everything's kind of stacked against Nick, but at the very least, she owes him the opportunity to tell the truth, to hear his side of things, because she wants to believe him, which is actually kind of interesting because it turns out Tiffany met with Nick on multiple occasions. Obviously it was actually Nancy's mom that convinced him to give her a chance. So she'd come every so often. They wouldn't talk at first because for him, he's so pissed because it's like she's the one that convicted him. Obviously, it's the whole situation of you weren't there to see everything, but little by little, she brought him Brooks books, and that became their form of communication. It's actually kind of interesting to find out the fact of the matter is they became friends in a way, like especially considering their circumstances. And I think there's actually a kind of beauty to the fact is that it's like the woman who basically her testimony helped convict you ended up becoming your friend and ally, probably one of the few allies and friends you had under those circumstances. But basically, Tiffany felt bad because getting to know Nick, it's the whole thing of like, now she regrets what she did because she probably found out later on what the exact circumstances were, or she probably did know the circumstances, but she had to tell the truth of what went down. And it's like, or like I said, the fact that she kept coming back afterwards must mean that it's something she found out the truth afterwards of like, oh wait, this is why he did it, this is what happened. So it's like, I sent a kid away for, and Nick at first kind of refers to it as self-defense because he doesn't want to tell Nancy the truth, but because for him it's like, wait, you're just digging, because he's thinking Nancy's just digging into everything connected to him, because it's like, at first it's like, because you actually think I'm capable of killing someone in cold-blooded murder, so you're actually scared of me. But for Nancy, it's just, I think there's a little bit of something there in her head of like, I need to know the truth, because before I can get a full assessment of anything, before I can make heads or tail of all this, I need all the information. Because I think that just comes from the factors of who she is as like a bit of a detective. It's like that part of your brain isn't going to stop working until you put all the puzzle pieces in the right places. I think it's just kind of almost like a borderline like OCD. I think that's, you can make the argument, I think a detective's mind is potentially like that. A really good detective's mind is going to be like that, where it's like you just can't quite, it's like on the tip of your tongue of like piecing it all together, but you need, it's like, oh, you're missing like a piece. You've got 5 pieces left, and, some from the corner, some from the middle of the puzzle. You got to piece it all together, so, well, the corner pieces will probably actually make it easier, because then how you actually do the puzzle, you start with the corners and work your way inwards. So it was kind of a terrible analogy I just made. Regardless, moving on. So it's that, but then obviously later on it's like, wait, you were trying to pump me for information so you can use it to give to Karen so you can make your own case better, because, Nancy goes, spending all this time with, Nick, she kind of saw him for who he was. The fact that seeing him the same way Tiffany did, in the sense of like, you're this person. The fact of the matter is, Nick isn't the type of person to hurt someone that he cares about, because him and Tiffany became friends. And the fact of the matter is, Nancy wasn't going to turn on him because she didn't believe he was responsible for Tiffany's murder at all. And even Karen being like, I hope you're 100% right, because obviously, like, your whole situation is kind of, screwed a little bit too. I did like the fact of like, Karen was following them, but it's like, I figured as much. Like, 2 people came out and was like, that's going to be Ace and Bess, isn't it? And lo and behold, turned out to be Ace and Bess. It's like, yeah, but obviously Karen was, kind of figured, I know exactly where you'll end up being later on. So it was kind of interesting to kind of see this very like heavily like puzzle thing, kind of, since I'm referencing puzzle pieces and stuff like that. There are so many angles to this. Tiffany really loved her some damn puzzles. Like, holy crap, that's like some borderline Danganronpa level like puzzles. I kind of feel like, if for me unfamiliar with Danganronpa, it's a light novel. A visual novel is the word I was looking for, right? Visual novel, I don't know if you consider that a JRPG. Like, I think visual novel is just a genre you just kind of leave it as, so it's not even like you have the visual novel JRPG. Maybe it's a murder mystery type of thing. Regardless, I'm going on a tangent, but it kind of reminded me of like intricate kind of like puzzles, kind of like that to a certain extent. I was like, there are many different layers upon layers upon layers. So that was kind of interesting, and it turns out what this all led to was puzzle. I'm got puzzles on the mind. The puzzles on the bear bonds, not bear bonds, or just bonds, which total about like 5 million, and it's like, whoa, so this was meant for Nick to find, but Nick is like, I don't want anything to do with it, because obviously that's just going to look suspicious, because now it's going to be like, oh, this is my motive for killing Tiffany. But at the same time too, it's like, but it was meant for him to find, in a sense of like, oh, because she wanted to leave him something so that he can start a new life, not this something be not traceable. So is that what this is all about? And that's the question again, like, why was it in Nancy's mom's car? I mean, I'm guessing because Nancy's mom put it there. I had, like, maybe this is something that Tiffany's been working on a long time, and it's just kind of like, hey, I have this opportunity. Maybe slowly but surely she's been adding to it. Well, because I feel like Nancy would have noticed Tiffany stopping by, but, we know that every once in a while, Ryan would come to town, so it's like maybe every once in a while she stopped by, put a little there, more and more the bonds over the years, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe that's something she did before, like, before they went to the restaurant and everything. Maybe she dropped that off. I just think it's just interesting that it was in her. The keys to finding all of this was in her mom's car. That's why I'm like, how, which Well, because I'm about to say, how did Nick know to do that? But it's like, right, they kind of, well, because he'd even talked about the fact is he knew that she was, like, he knew who Nancy was before, when they first met anyway. So that's a whole thing in itself. So that's an interesting side of things to find. Like, I wonder, was she taking from her husband to give to Nick because, like, oh, he deserved this, he needs this, or what? I'm sure it's something her husband's unaware about. So it's like, okay, so that's interesting. I didn't talk about it, but Nick did tell everyone the truth about what went down. That basically, there's a dude named Austin he was rivals with. Like, that rivalry was kind of a thing on the field of, like, football field. They pushed each other. But then it trailed off the field from time to time. And in this particular case, Austin got drunk. He was getting very handsy and was like, yo, your friend, she's going to stay here. You can go. And it's like, yo, Nick wasn't about that, so laid him out, but he got back up, and next time he hit him, he ended up falling out a window and ended up dying. So I don't, because he said it was a 2-story fall, so I don't know whether it's like, oh, he fell to his death, or maybe he cut himself, or maybe a combination. Whatever the case may be, that's what led to these circumstances of where he's at right now. And for him, it's a sad thing is, like, he felt like a monster for so long. Because the thing is, Tiffany was kind of helping him find a way to move on and not just kind of stay in the past. Obviously, it's been a hard thing for him because obviously Nancy's kind of, Nancy, as well as the others, are kind of getting him to trail up the past. But for him, it's like, if it means kind of letting you guys trust me, I'll tell you what this is all about, So I thought that was kind of a heartwarming moment of everyone being like, because obviously at the same time that's all going down, the storm is happening, but the storm ends up passing, and he's just like, it's passed, and I think it passed, and then, like, he kind of walks away. Best is like, the fact is, what you did in the past doesn't determine who you are right now, so everyone kind of giving their support in that regard. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope, especially considering the fact is, throwing Nick under the bus even George had said it earlier, would be like, it would look good for all of us. So that was kind of a nice, turn to that whole situation. Obviously, we get some super, 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 super spooky stuff in this episode, whether that's Ryan at Carson's, like, running over, like, the finances are like, oh yeah, like, if it turns out she died of natural causes, I get some of that money, but that money of hers was going into a inn of some sort that she was trying to get labeled as, like, a landmark. And then obviously Ryan's kind of getting a little haunted by, like, a ghost lady, which it seems like that might be Lucy, which he makes a reference to Carson later on. It's like, because it's like, who do you owe money to? And he's like, sometimes it's better to leave the bodies buried where they are, figuratively this time. And he emphasized that, figuratively this time. So once again, because even Nancy had brought it up to her dad, it's like, yeah, you said that dress was something stupid, so why is it gone? It's like, oh, I threw it away. I let it in trash, it wasn't there. Oh, honey, you're so crazy. It's like, it's so effed up that you're, like, making your daughter, trying to make it sound like she's crazy, considering the fact is you literally disposed of that last episode, so it's not like she's 100% crazy. It's like, I think he's kind of forgetting who he's going up against. It's like, your daughter, she might have kind of left that teen detective stuff behind, but, like, her muscles are kind of flexed, and she's figuring out, like, yeah, you're kind of lying about some stuff, and she doesn't know why. Which I'm still circling back to the fact is, they had to have covered up a murder or something for Ryan's family. Like, either it was something it has to be connected to Lucy all those years ago, and it's like, it's either because Ryan did it, or I don't know. I would assume so. So it's like, because even Carson kind of gave that look of, like, when he said that. So it's like the whole thing of, like, they definitely covered for Lucy. And the fact is, digging up dead bodies, and, like, they pulled up that chest all those years ago. It's like, there's definitely something there. So that's immediately where my mind goes. But we see that not just Ryan, but it does seem like Carson is haunted too. And maybe that's the reason why Nancy's being haunted, because, like, you're a teen detective, but you're literally in the middle of all this. You're trying to solve Tiffany's murder, which is connected to my murder, because this is connected to Ryan, which is also, you're the daughter of your mom and dad, and your mom and dad has something to do with all this potentially in the past, connected to Lucy, which all that could tie back into why Tiffany was murdered in the first place too. It seems like we don't have all the direct connections, but it seems like it's all potentially connected. So, but, like, I like that creepy thing of just kind of, like, at one point Ryan directly sees it behind Carson. Carson looks and it's like, oh, there's nothing there, and it's like, oh shit, this is super creepy, dude. And even the fact is that at one point some water drips down, and Carson, because it's like, I think Lucy's ghost above him, and he looks up and it's like, yo, I thought it'd be like a little bit of a hint of the supernatural side, but it's like as these episodes is going on, they've like punched into your face of like supernatural stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it'd probably be used a little more sparingly than it's being used. Not like they need to. I knew like the earlier stuff I'd read made it seem like it was going to be a little bit of a supernatural stuff, which isn't to say that the supernatural stuff has fully taken over, but it's definitely marking its territory in the show. It's kind of interesting because even George gets visited by someone named, what was her name again? I'm blanking on the lady that was there, Rita, and then like, because even Bess had talked to her too. I said, "Oh, she wants a job here and everything," and all this crazy stuff is happening to George. It's like first the blood, then the fact is like a coffee thing burst in George's hand. She's walking, and a harpoon thing falls. Ace was able to get her out of the way. They put her in a circle full of salt, which is like, hey, it's the CW, and, obviously that's a go-to thing in Supernatural to, keep ghosts from, crossing that line, which I guess that's like a go-to thing for dealing with ghosts in general. Like, Supernatural's the first show I remember actively doing that. There might be other stuff, like maybe that popped up in Charmed and I don't remember. Maybe even Angel and Buffy, because those are like older Supernatural things I go to, but obviously Supernatural is the one that comes to my mind because it's popped up the most. It's like a go-to thing of dealing with ghosts is salt. Obviously they use like rock salt in the shotguns and everything, but also because this is all in the CW, and you get what I'm trying to go with the whole situation. But nevertheless, so that was interesting, but it's like, oh, it's not going to work if you don't believe, so you should stay inside that circle. But luckily Nick and Nancy got back in time to pull George away, and it's like, oh, she could have been electrocuted, like a fire was started and everything. But it's like, oh, where's Rita? Rita turns out to be dead because she got decapitated on a boating accident. And so it's like, okay, wait. Because even I was kind of shocked too, because I'm like, that whole George kicking over the bucket of blood literally happened last episode, which wasn't even like a full day ago. It was like, because didn't that whole thing of like, oh, you have to kick over the bucket at like midnight, so it's literally only been a couple hours. Even if it wasn't midnight, it hasn't even been a full day, and like literally oh, she's cursed. The curse is trying to kill her, which the curse wasn't lifted or anything. So I'm like, I guess that's something George is gonna have to be on lookout forever. So there's that side of things. Obviously, Carson knows that Nancy was at the end because it's like the red wine. He saw a footprint. I'm like, ooh, always the small details that catch you. And it's like, oh, there's red wine on her shoe. So he knows she was there, which I'm sure that's going to lead to some interesting questions. Obviously, he's trying to represent her because of this whole burglary thing and, obviously trespassing. But it's like, now you're doing that again. Obviously, he's not going to do, but obviously for him, it's like if anyone finds out you were there, that's just going to add more to it because a place that's connected to the victim, it's just going to look even more suspicious. So, I don't know. I'm like circling back to it. I am interested about who this person is that Ryan owes money because it seems like he comes from a rich family, which we haven't really tackled the stuff about his mom and dad. So it might be a thing that he himself has been cut off and he's up to owes some money to some people, which is going to probably point to them potentially being the killers, but that probably won't be the case. I don't know. He's very desperate to get money to pay off some debts. What that is, maybe some other people who covered up some stuff for him years. We'll see on that front. But there is an interesting development that Ace ended up finding out about Bess's situation because they were driving by her van. Obviously, he didn't know it at the time, but it's like, oh, the storm had not like a branch through it and stuff like that. And obviously, like she was kind of worried about it, but he's like, are you okay? She's like, oh, I'm good. And he kind of pieced it together. Once again, Ace is smarter than, because even Nancy's like, oh, he's definitely smarter than he lets on. So later on, he calls up Nancy and is like, yo, I don't want to embarrass her. Nancy's like, I got this. So she ends up talking to Bess and is like, hey, I kind of owe you for helping out with everything. So, if you want to stay, and it's like, Bess is like, I'll stay at your house if it makes you feel better. And lo and behold, Nancy finds a ring. It's just kind of one thing after another. It's like, oh, one suspect on the list. Oh, and one suspect off the list. Oh, and this person's back on the top of the list because it's like, oh, you sold Tiffany's ring. It's like, did I just let a murderer into my house? It's like, no. She's a klepto. She steals stuff. Like, that's going to be her thing. Because obviously she brings up the fact is of like, oh yeah, families are complicated, which Nancy's like, oh yeah, I totally understand. Obviously having the issue she does have with her father right now. But I'm like, there has to be more to it. The reason why she's not staying with her aunt, either because her aunt kicked her out because it's like, oh, maybe she stole from her aunt and that's why she's not currently living with her. Like I said, I think she has a little bit of a klepto problem. Like, obviously, like I said, that kind of got introduced in the first episode of, like, those were the crimes that were kind of potentially on her record, because she was like, oh, criminal. I had a little thieving, but obviously, like, McGinnis was like, no, I'm just talking about Nick. So there's that whole thing. So, like I said, I'm not worried about her being a suspect, but I think slowly but surely things are going to start pointing to other people. Because we know that Ace took a picture of George and Ryan together, so that's definitely going to put her on suspect list for the police at the very least. But to be fair, Nancy is doing some investigating and stuff like that. I think that speaks volumes to the fact this guy, obviously Ace knows much like Nancy knows. Like, Bess is the only one who doesn't know about George and Ryan. I mean, I think Nick doesn't know either, but the fact is, everyone else that's probably going to become not public knowledge, but knowledge within the confines of the investigation. So there's at least 2 more people to kind of strike off the list, and well, technically 3 because Nancy still is on the top of, or at least 1 person on the list for the police and other people, especially because everything that she's been up to. So I don't remember if I brought this up in the last episode. I think it's kind of, I think I thought about it, but I don't know if I actually did. But even if I did, I'm going to reiterate it here. I think it's kind of interesting that the show does kind of give you, like, inside of Nancy's head. I feel like, there's a few shows. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I'm sure if you point out one, you'd be like, oh, this one totally does that. I'm like, oh, like, there's probably examples that I'm familiar with, but this is like at least in more recent memory, one of the few shows I know that kind of gives you, a peek inside your character's head. I mean, I guess maybe that's supposed to be, I think, probably them adapting the book, because typically I'm sure the books are told from her perspective as well, so you probably get a lot of inner monologues type of thing, so maybe that's what that kind of, because I don't even know if there's that many CW shows that do that in general. Shows in general, but definitely anything on this network that kind of does the inner monologue. I feel like, I guess it depends on the story, but because it's kind of being like a very, like, understanding her thought process, and because the story is kind of told from a third-person perspective, but also on some levels a first-person perspective. It kind of switches back and forth, and maybe, like I said, that's supposed to be more in line with, like, the Nancy Drew books. Like I said, I don't think I've ever read anything of the Nancy Drew book. I might have seen them in a library when I was younger, but I don't think I've ever read them. But regardless, a lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so I'm very curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I think we're really going to dive into Bess's situation, because I think Nancy's really going to be pushing an investigation into her, just because it's like, oh, she has a ring and everything, she's going to be playing coy, but she's going to be trying to, figure this whole thing out. So I'm curious to kind of dive into Bess, and obviously curious to see if this whole George situation continues with the whole curse and everything, so we'll see. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time with me, be happy, be safe, all light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.